Samuel, firstly, let's kick off on the rights issue, which of course is now over for local shareholders. I know that you were heavily involved in that. Can you give us an indication of how successful the Kenya Airways rights issue was?
Well, thank you very much, Samantha. Very good comment there concerning Kenya Airways. We are seeing the closure of the rights issue, which was going on for most of April. The uptake on the rights, especially on the retail front, was a bit of a concern because most retailers were not really into it because of the fact that it was looking a bit long-term. But on the institutional front, we saw very, very strong sentiments on that. And so we are hoping that the numbers, as they're going to be coming forth, they'll be able to still hit their minimum target of 70% and even be able to go slightly above that going forward.
As you say, they've been able to hit that minimum target. Have they been able to manage to raise the $250 million that they were looking to raise?
Well, the rights issue just closed on Friday. I'm sure right now is when they're trying to make sure that they get the numbers right. But looking at it in terms of the uptake for most of the month of April, there was a bit of a concern because the Kenyan culture is more of a last-minute issue. So my thinking would be maybe the numbers should be coming forth towards the close of this week. But in terms of the indications that they'd already given is that, especially on the institutional front, they already had confirmations of close to 70% uptake. So definitely we might see them being able to raise slightly, maybe above 80%.
Let's look at the trading update that we also got from Kenya Airways for the quarter to March. Passenger numbers up by 5.2% on a year-on-year basis during this quarter. Now, just unpacking those numbers, you can really see the effects of the slowdown in Europe on the volumes that we saw in the passenger numbers moving through Kenya Airways. The volumes there down by 4%. What were your thoughts on those numbers, the key highlights for you?
Well, in terms of the passenger numbers, definitely that had been a bit of a concern for Kenya Airways, and we are aware that they'd even given a profit warning because anytime now they should also be giving us their numbers for the year 2011, 2012. But looking at it in terms of going forward, especially in terms of the position, just like you mentioned, there's still a bit of a challenge on some of those markets, but also looking at it in terms of their African positioning, we should expect them to try and see whether they can take advantage of the African routes so they can still be able to cushion some of the challenges they're seeing in terms of the global front.
Samuel, one of the reasons that we saw an increase in numbers was the fact that they're now flying to South Sudan. And we know that there's escalating tensions and conflict in South Sudan between the two Sudans, of course. Surely this is a worrying factor, the fact that they are expanding into a region where there's a lot of political risk right now.
Definitely. Looking at it in terms of some of the regions that they are trying to put their foot in, definitely that will be a bit of a concern. We saw what happened in Mali and the effect it had on their performance. And also Southern Sudan, as at now, we should expect some activity to be going forward in terms of ensuring that it's politically stable. But definitely that is a major risk for them, and definitely that would affect in terms of the numbers that they're going to be able to come forth. I think the challenge for them now is try to ensure that as much as they're expanding, they're not expanding into regions that are very, very risky, because definitely that might pose a major risk in terms of even the kind of numbers they might still put forth.
Samuel, let's shift gear to the breweries sector in terms of a change of management that is taking place there. Of course, Seni Adetu is moving over to Nigeria now. He's going to head up the Guinness fraction of Diageo's African operations there. He's been a great CEO, of course, of Ebel. He's managed to grow the beer portfolio. He's managed to also grow the spirits portfolio. Are there any concerns about Ebel as Seni steps away?
Well, definitely, just like you mentioned, in terms of corporate governance, I think change is good because we might see a bit of policy shift and a bit of corporate governance management changes in terms of how the company has been able to perform. But look at it in terms of the trend of the company. Definitely, it has been able to sustain its market share in a big way, despite the challenges we saw with what was happening with Submiller. But definitely, in terms of going forward, I guess the market has already started to react to that. We saw a lot of uncertainty and also a bit of positive sentiment. So the share rose significantly, and from how it performed on Monday, we saw a bit of a dip because I guess now it's more of trying to understand what would happen with the new changes. But I guess being a positive change in the sense that it's not something really negative happening, it's more of just a change of management. Definitely, we should expect a lot of positive sentiments going forward in terms of how the company performs. But I guess the challenge right now would be for them to try and see that they maintain their share price as well as their market share in the market, as well as their product offering, and also in terms of ensuring that they sustain their growth.
And of course, we've got Devlin Hainsworth, who's the CEO of Guinness Nigeria. That's the second largest listed brewer on that end, moving over to East Africa. So perhaps he'll bring some knowledge and expertise with him from the Nigerian market.
Definitely, yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Let's move on. Let's move on to the inflation numbers that we saw coming out, ticking down to 13.06%. Of course, that is a lot lower than forecast. What does this mean for the likelihood of an interest rate cut tomorrow?
Well, looking at it in terms of the interest rate, definitely that's very, very good news for our market, because we've really, over the last 6 months, we've seen a very, very high rise in terms of the inflation levels, and getting us to 13% is a very, very good move, though on the retail front, most people are still yet to really feel the impact of some of these numbers, because there's still a lot of concern in terms of the product prices. But definitely in terms of the numbers coming forth, 13% is a very, very good move, and over the last few months, we've seen a very major drop, which is a positive indication, and ahead of MPC meeting tomorrow, we're hoping that at least in terms of the 18% central bank rate that they have held for quite a while, we should expect them to ease up a bit. But I guess there's still a bit of concern in terms of the fundamentals, especially in the behavior of the shilling, as well as some of these other concerns in terms of the market.
Samuel, are you looking at a cut or not, basically? Are you pricing in a cut right now?
I would definitely be expecting them to at least marginally drop that CBR rate.